Mom's watching me like I'm weird. What?
Oh.
What? 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 Just kidding. They vaulted in.
They vaulted in. No. Yes, they
Let's vault
essentially
in.
for the
Sorry,
back of
but
the Philippines.
is Luciano PR, whatever his name is.
Santiago.
He's si Luciano. Is he Luciano Pavarotti or Santiago? Because I can totally imagine a parent doing that. I'm sorry. It got stuck in my head and I'm just like, it could be
Dude.
Pavarotti. We don't know.
I-
Why does this make me think of like those Hallmark Christmas movies?
Yes, I'm the lighthouse keeper, but also
the mayor who's also the baker.
it just takes a generation to wipe it out,
Yeah.
And gosh, can you imagine the people who held on to this knowledge and just passed it on like in secret?
Yeah.
We answered our own question. So that was
I
the
love
check
it.
and balance.
The Socratic method.
Thank you, Socrates. Hello.
Hello. Hi, guys.
Hi, guys. It's us again. It's the Gods Must Be Crazy podcast, vacation edition.
So I'm Ice.
I'm Anima.
And we're your hosts. The Gods Must Be Crazy podcast is a podcast on Philippine mythology and folklore. And today is the continuation of part 3 of I don't know how many parts.
3. This is the last installation.
Okay.
This is the last installation of our Babaylan episode. I knew, coming in, I knew it was going to be intense. It's such a loaded
because
and
there's
heavy.
a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. To be honest, it's kind of like a commentary on the social structures of the Philippines than it is, right? More than just like a person. And
which we will also get to in a future episode, the social stratification.
Yes, we will. The social stratifications.
Yeah.
So it's the last part of the Babaylan. So just a recap for those of you who haven't heard the first 2 episodes. In the first episode, we sort of talked about the history. How do you become a Babaylan? Is it something you audition for? Is it something you're gifted and you have? Are you like a mutant? Or are you like a trained for it and so forth? The second episode, we discussed the functions, like all the jobs that they had to do in their tribes and their villages, from the magics that they do all the way to black magic, protection, healing, seances, and calling back the spirits. And so now we go to the social status, which I'm really very excited to talk about, because in depictions in modern life, the Babaylan is always called, the shaman, the healer, the village elder, right? And they give commentary on when you should build your house, how do you improve the harvest? But in fact, they were not just these functionaries, but they were a very critical part of the social structure of the community. They were so highly respected, and they are on par with the pre-colonial noble class. They're not necessarily noble themselves. Sometimes they are, but not necessarily. Sometimes if you're just a kid who heard voices and your aunt was a Babaylan, then you can also happen to be a Babaylan. I love it because it's sort of like a rise from the poor. Yeah.
Yeah. No, because to your point, right? Not that anyone, but like if you have the gifts or the resources to learn, you can be a Babaylan, right? But you know what it kind of reminds me of? It kind of reminds me of the Hindu kind of caste system. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Because in the caste system, you have the priests,
The
Brahmins, and then the warrior class, the kshatriyas, right? And then the middle class, the merchants, and then I forgot what the lowest class is, Surya or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Like because what I remember is that used to be the priests and the warriors were interchangeable. So it wasn't necessarily that the priests were above or below.
Yeah.
Because it depends. In times of war,
Yes,
it would be the warrior class would be the top, the highest
top.
class. And then in times of peace, it would be the priests.
Which is interesting because, in times of war, the datu would, in pre-colonial Philippines, the datu would leave the village to pillage and get slaves like they did in the
Ano yan? Pangangayaw? At
pangangayaw. In my head, it's
panghubat.
pangangaray. Is it pangangaray, pangangayaw?
No.
Pangangayaw.
Pangangayaw.
Pangangaray. And so when the datu is away, the vice president, the vice datu is the babaylan. The babaylan is the boss of the community, and when the boss is away, and they were powerful ritual specialists, and it's important for them because their rituals had to do with keeping things okay while the datu was away. And so that's why all of their powers of healing and making it rain, making the harvest happen. So that's why it was important that they were sort of like second in command when the datu was gone.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, it makes a bit of a practical sense, right? Because if you're going to war, you're gonna take all the men
Yeah, yeah.
or
And
women
some
warriors,
warriors,
right?
some women warriors, yeah.
Yeah, or all the warriors basically,
Yeah.
which necessitates most of the men, I'm assuming,
Yeah.
right? And who's the most powerful woman left
Yes,
in the
exactly.
village?
So what would she do while the datu was out? She would make sure that they protect the village from the evil magic that may have been directed towards the datu while he's away. He makes sure that women have safe pregnancies and childbirth.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then they have offerings. They seem to have a lot of offerings for protection and for in some occasions, if they're and they protect not just their own communities but also if the datus have had allied up with other datus and they're gonna go off to war, they try to protect that as well. And in my head, I remember it was like in Harry Potter when they were protecting Hogwarts and everyone like sort of like raised their wands to the sky, and then they all created like this dome but like together. So I like to think of like the Babaylans on Panay Island, or for example, on each of these islands, like all of the Panay people banded together and okay, let's all like cast these protections around our respective villages together. I like that.
Yeah,
That's how I imagine the
they
magic.
they vaulted in.
They vaulted. No, yes, they
Let's vault
essentially
in!
they
Or
eventually vaulted in.
what's the other Captain Planet? Earth!
Captain Planet.
Fire!
Heart. Heart. That's such a useless whatever. Anyways, whatever. Gusto lang
Hey,
niya.
don't say that!
No, I don't like it. It's like, what is your power? Oh, I'm empathetic to your cause of sustainability. Heart. Anyway,
If you don't
so
change hearts, you're not gonna change minds.
I know,
Anyway.
I know. So William Henry Scott had observed also in his book in Barangay, the is that right? Barangay, right?
Barangay is the archaic
Yeah,
pronunciation. You can say barangay. It's correct pa rin
barangay.
naman.
Yes, he also what he observed was the Babaylans, whether they are male or trans. He used transvestites, which we know is not the correct term, but they're usually women. They are wealthy in their own right. So
Of course.
what income does the Babaylan get? According to Luciano P.R. Santiago in his book To Love and to Suffer, the payment they get for their services included food, wine, clothing, gold, which I
Love it.
love. Gold.
Sorry,
Regarding the
but
Philippines.
is Luciano PR, whatever his name is?
Santiago.
Is he Luciano? Is he Luciano Pavarotti or Santiago? Because I can totally imagine a parent doing that. I'm sorry. It got stuck in my head and I'm just like, it could be
Dude,
Pavarotti. We don't know. It could be.
It could be. I have cousins. Remember my cousins named Martin Luther
Yeah.
King Dimapilis?
Now on, I'm calling him Luciano Pavarotti.
Okay, so Luciano
I'm sorry.
Pavarotti or Santiago. Or it's Pavarotti. Kasi PR.
Oh my god, it's okay. Anyway.
Luciano
Sorry, back to
Pavarotti,
topic.
Santiago. Okay, so they get paid in food, wine, clothing, gold,
Gold.
and the quantity and quality of the gold and quantity depended on the social status of the supplicant. So it seems like you pay what you can, right? So they probably have rich clients if they get paid to do the certain service. So in the shamans, the babaylans, have a similarity to Shinto spiritualists or spiritual men, the kanushi, and their
They can do it.
jobs, apart from being shamans, healers, protectors, witches, they also range from being they have multiple jobs. They have a side hustle. So
Who's this? The
the
Japanese
the
ones?
Japanese one, but also the shamans. The shamans also have the babaylans also have side hustles. So they can also be, apart from their role as a babaylan, they can also be merchants, they can also be warriors, farmers,
Oh,
blacksmiths, craftsfolk, weaver, potter, musician, and a barber or a chef,
I love it.
depending on the preference of the shaman, the skill and the need of the community. And I'm thinking there's so much opportunity for magic. Like there's like weaving magic. And maybe the
Yeah.
blacksmith one can make like a magical spear or magical music.
Magic shoes, blusang
Yeah.
itim. Possibilities
Yes.
are endless.
I
Yeah.
know, because before I read this, I was just thinking, oh, they're like doctors essentially. They're like social doctors. But no, but they could also be the farmer. They can grow a magical kabute or something. I don't know. So you don't farm
Or baka
mushrooms.
ano, maybe it's like, don't quit your day job. Like
Yeah,
they have something to do day to day.
it's like us.
Maybe it's yeah. Maybe it's in villages where you don't have that many pag-anitos naman. Like you're
Yeah,
not too busy. So then
yeah,
there's something else to keep you
yeah.
occupied.
Or smaller towns, or not too warlike towns. I think of it as like, in these TV shows, these American TV shows where the mayor is also like the town pilot, or the mayor is also the fireman, or the mayor is also the town doctor, so it's
Why does this make me think of like those Hallmark Christmas movies?
yes. Yes, I'm the
the
lighthouse
mayor
keeper, but
the
also the
mayor who
mayor.
is also the mayor who's also the baker and he hates
Yes.
Christmas and
Yes,
you're gonna
yes,
change
because
his
he's a
mind or
widow.
some shit
He's a
like that.
widow, and then this high-powered girl from the city comes back home because she got laid off from her high-powered lawyer job, and
No,
she
she
forgot
she
the
went
value
back
of family.
home. She went back home because her grandmother died and left
Uh-huh.
her the house and the
Yes,
cafe that is
yes.
across from
That she
the
has to order
bakery.
food from the bakery. There's this show on, I think it's on Netflix, but my father-in-law really loves it. It's called The Good Witch. On the topic of witches, it's called The
I've
Good
heard about
Witch.
this show. Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
got
but
the
I've
guy
not seen
from
it.
Grey's Anatomy, and he's the new doctor, and she's a witch, but she's also actually has powers, and the mayor is also like the country club head or something like that, but it's one of those multi-purpose jobs in small town. I actually find that aspirational. Like I would go to a small town and I would be like, yes, I'm the mayor and also the Zumba teacher, you know? I would totally
But
do
my
that.
question for you is that done as a matter of plot or as a matter of budget? Because you're not
I
gonna
think
get
it
a lot
it
of
says it
like
depends on
big
the
actors.
preference of the shaman and the skill and the need of the community. So
Oh,
what if you're
sorry.
a shaman?
I'm still talking about Hallmark movies. But anyway, let's move on. I was fully in that topic. Anyway,
Sorry,
okay.
sorry, I
Back.
thought you were
It's
segueing.
okay. No, no, no. We move back to
Okay,
Babaylan.
let's go back. Hallmark, you stayed there in your lane. They work though. I like them. Anyway, so yeah, so these side jobs. So some shamans have two occupations at the time. If they need the role of having if it's really needed by the community, and it's hypothesized that the tradition of having a second job or more than two jobs is ingrained in the culture societies in the Philippines and still practiced today by certain communities that have not been converted to Christianity. So some Muslim communities, yes, have still practiced this tradition of their healer also has another job. Imams, like prayer leaders, also have other jobs and day jobs. So what happened? So this was all the things that we've been talking about recently have all been pre-colonial. What happened when the Spanish came? And so,
Yes.
yes, right. So they started waning when the Philippines started converting to Islam and Catholicism, and particularly under the Spanish Empire, they were maligned and they were accused of being witches and priests of the devil, and they were prosecuted harshly by the Spanish clergy. What they did, and this is kind of horrible, is I mentioned this in the first episode.
I think I heard that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they burned everything down. So that's why we don't have a lot of records of like what do anitos look like, what were the spells. They burned everything associated and connected to the native people's indigenous religions, like shrines called dambana. And the word dambana, it's a shrine for anitos, for your ancestors and the other spirits you worship and appeal to. But dambana is also the word used for the altar in a church, right? So, for example, in old Filipino movie, when a guy says he's gonna marry a girl before he goes off to war, he's like, "Dadalhin kita sa dambana. I will bring you to the dambana." Which
To
so
the
from
altar.
to the altar, which is for me is it's an interesting again an
It's
amalgamation.
appropriation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
No, no, no.
exactly.
It's appropriation. You're
Yeah,
taking something that existed before
yeah,
and you're using it for, you
yeah.
know,
I mean, if
inculcating people into your new religion.
exactly. And they must have used that, right? The Spanish were like, look, this church altar is the same as the Dambana. It's this is why we'll call it the same thing that you called the whatever the Babaylans had in their house. So they forcefully, oh, this is so horrible. You know what they did? So they got their idols, the Anitos, and they made children poop. They
I
made
read
them
this.
poop on their ancestors.
Like the ultimate sacrilege. They made them defecate on these
Yeah, on the idols.
images
And
that were like worship
sacred.
and representative of their ancestors.
And until to
It's
this day,
truly,
they really
truly
believe
horrible.
it's super bad, like super horrible. And you know what they would do if you refused? They would kill you. They would murder children who refuse to poop on their anitos. So, so it's really and then they specifically targeted female shamans. And they sort of let the male shamans continue on. So
Did
in
they?
yeah, yeah, yeah. This Babaylan online that we found, the Babaylan Tatay Adlaw, is a guy shaman, and his line has been, it used to
Yeah.
be like a female shaman line, and then it was passed down to him as a male shaman. So in the society, what happens after the Babaylans were prosecuted and killed and stuff? The functions are still there. The functions that they need to do is still there. Then that's why there are so many folk healers, and a lot of them are predominantly male. So,
Yeah, because
right?
when I first started learning about
Mm-mm.
Albolario is kind of like a witch doctor, like a
Yeah.
local healer, natural healer. In my mind, the image is always this old guy
The
because
old guy with like
it's
the
only
panyo
been
on his
old guys.
hair. Yeah, it's always
Yeah,
been old guys. I've met several, and it's always been men. And if it's a
the
woman,
Albolario.
yeah, and mambabarang, and if the faith healer, but if it's a woman who does magic, she's a witch. She's a bruja,
Yeah,
which is the
yeah.
Spanish word for a
But
witch.
so there are two things I wanted to kind of interject based on what I read.
Mm-hmm.
The first is that the Babaylanas did not give up easily.
No.
So they tried to kind of still maintain because they were still influential, right? You can't completely erase influence. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why what the Spanish did was like,
They
very
fought.
aggressive,
They
but long
led.
term propaganda.
Yeah, a lot of them became revolutionary leaders.
Revolutionary.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of them did, male and female. And a lot of them sort of do you remember when we were talking about Anitos and they have these cults, cults and sects? A lot of them converted into that and would use similar things of like imbuing power. Remember the gumbursa, the amulet, which is supposed to be the robes of gumbursa. This is much, much later on, but a lot of things they took, they I wouldn't say take back, but they appropriated Catholic objects
That's
to
what I was
imbue
gonna
it.
say. So the
Yeah.
multiple different Santo Niños are
Yes.
actually, they took this idea
Anitos.
of the Santo Niño and then they
Yeah.
made it like serve the function of what the Anito
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
right? To the local
Exactly.
community. So
Yeah.
I think they tried their best to kind of maintain like the old faith, right? Think
Mm-hmm.
about it, right? It's not right now you think about these as like scary, dangerous, culty kind of beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
but these were like the original beliefs that they were
Yes.
forced to kind of hide and
Yeah.
kind of change and evolve
Shamed.
throughout the years.
Yeah. Yeah. They were
Yeah,
told that it was backward. Yeah.
yeah. And then the second thing that it reminded me of, I'm sure you're gonna get to this eventually, but because of this very like decades long propaganda, like anytime a powerful woman religious leader would emerge, or anytime probably in the first couple of years when they were attacking these women, I mean, guys, this is the origin of the aswang
Yes.
as we
Yes.
know it today,
Yes.
right? Obviously,
Yes.
there were aswang in the past, but whenever you think about that weird lady who lives in the edge of the forest or who lives far from the village,
Has a lot of
why should
weird
you fear
herbs.
her?
Yeah.
She is dangerous. She has black magic, etc. This is part of the narrative that they
Yeah.
used, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
a lot of what we stories we hear of aswang today were partly propaganda,
Yes.
right? To discredit some of the most powerful
Yes.
people in society at the time.
Yeah. Who could
It's
probably tell you a thing of two,
Jesus.
a thing of or two about nature, about battle, about strategy, because she had the knowledge, and the
In
Spanish
the
didn't
past.
in the
Yeah.
past, but the Spanish didn't want that credibility to be decentralized from the priests and the Catholics, so as conversion happened, and as the influence of the Catholic Christianity happened, that's exactly what you said, that they said you should believe Christianity because he's just another Anito. This is our Anito. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing you're believing in. And then they sort of slowly phased out all the other Anitos, and it's like, this is the new Anitos now, these Santo Niños, these saints. If you are lost, you pray to this saint instead of the Anito of your ancestors. And since they had burned so much writings and prosecuted babaylans who would pass on the oral tradition, it just takes a generation to wipe it out.
Yeah.
And gosh, can you imagine the people who held on to this knowledge and just passed it on like in secret? you know
Yeah.
and then just like, I'm gonna tell you these stories, blah blah blah, and you think it's just gonna be like a story, but really this is our roots. Can you
But the
and it's
problem, yeah, and I think the problem is like even no matter how faithfully you pass it on,
mm-hmm,
they're not gonna fully understand the context,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
right? Of why these things are important,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
you were talking about how it takes years and years of study to become a babaylan,
Yes,
right? If you don't have that support system anymore, you're not going to be able to pass down everything as well, right?
exactly. Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's why the remains of what we have today are things that are still practical for the local communities,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
Like the local healing, the herb lore,
The
and stuff like
weather.
that.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have the other stuff, which is
Nope.
like, you know, your function during war, how do you
Yeah,
protect your community and stuff like that. I mean,
yeah,
obviously we're saying all of this is all pure conjecture. We
yeah.
haven't talked to babaylans
I,
yet.
I I would love to know. I hope it's some in there somewhere, but I hadn't seen it yet in my research. Is, are they judges? Like, what if there's issues? What if there are conflicts within the community of like, he's sleeping with my wife and blah 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 blah, or like, he stole my goat. No, I didn't. The goat wandered into my backyard. Blah blah blah. How do they resolve things like that? What were the principles behind it?
Didn't you say didn't you say that they had those types of things?
They had that function, but like, what? How did they decide it? Were they laws? Did they write laws? Did they, what was the ruling principle? Is it just what they felt like? So I wonder, like, were they legislative? Did they have legislative functions, like, starting today you can only have this and that, and you can lend your wife to this guy for 1 week, and if you ate, I don't know, I'm mixing up my Greek myths, but what were those principles too? Because the Spanish, I'm segueing back. The Spanish leveraged the frameworks of the society to insert their own things. So, for example,
Yeah.
how did they get pre-colonial Filipinos to accept the friars, for example? They said, you know how shamans, there's like a more powerful shaman and a less powerful shaman, and they're defending their different towns. This is now a more powerful shaman, and you have to accept them because my abbais, I'm a Spanish friar. My abbais, my spirit guides were more powerful than this spirit guide. So I'm the new one. And
And it goes back to how they demoted a lot of the powerful gods, right?
exactly,
So
exactly.
Makiling got
Yes.
demoted from
Yes.
a goddess allegedly
To
to
like a diwata.
mountain nymph.
Yeah. And they would desecrate religious objects. They would desecrate sacred trees and sacred areas with impunity, but like with no repercussions. So if you think about it, like you don't point at that tree because the
And if nothing happened
Anito.
to the Spanish, people are like, oh, maybe
Oh, they're
maybe it
right.
wasn't that
They did defeat
important
the
anyway.
Anito. Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, Catholics are are another special kind of superstitious, but they demonstrated, and if there was a risk, they probably say like we can accept this risk. So they demonstrated that there were no repercussions, and the natives were like, oh, they're probably true, they're probably right.
Point, Anima, I think we need to do like an omnibus of what are all of the repercussions and consequences of Christianity
There's
and
so much.
Catholicism
There's so much.
on pre-colonial religion and
Hmm.
and beliefs, right? Because I
Yeah,
think we talk about it a lot. I mean, look, it's so pervasive that I mean almost every episode actually we
yeah,
mention it, right? Yeah, it's
yeah.
it's
At
kind of
some point.
sad.
It's sad. It's sad. I mean, but that now it takes us to how how they adapt, evolve, and overcome. They started using the rosaries, crucifixes, holy water. They use them as anting-anting or fetish objects, and they used Latin prayers and verses, and they became part of their
Wait,
repertoire.
who calls anting-antings fetish objects?
In it's fairly common, no? Anting-antings
Fetish
and
object?
yeah, talismans are fetishes, fetish objects. The word fetish in a sexual context is a new association of the word fetish. Like things like relicarios, like when they preserve like the finger of a
So what's
saint,
the
that's
actual
called a
definition of
fetish.
fetish?
A fetish, let's see. Fetish.
Fetish is an inanimate object worshipped for supposal.
Yes, magic
Oh,
powers, yes. And then later on it became a sexual thing. So as fetish is an inanimate object worshipped or in its supposed magic powers because it is considered to be inhabited by a spirit. So things like relicarios, when they have like the teeth of saints or like
you
the
learn
hair of
something new every
saints.
day.
Yes, yes. I learned it,
You
I
learn
think,
something new every day.
from Constantine. I think is what I learned it from, the usage of fetish in a non-sexual way. So continuing on, we mentioned earlier, right, that the all of a sudden the anitos, the dambanas were replaced now by the saints, by other idols, and then the Spanish attributed Anito like powers to like the Santo Niños and the Anitos and stuff like that. And
Mm-hmm.
they said this was white magic. So, they also said that, and then this also became, I'm hypothesizing that the belief of Diwatas and spirits wouldn't go away. So what they did was they attributed European features to the Diwatas and the Encantos so that they would be associated with with the Spanish, but also that from a power standpoint. But at the same time, don't trust them because they will steal you away, they will deceive you, they will seduce you, they will play tricks on you. So I find that to be like probably a double-edged sword, right? So if you're like thinking, don't trust
But
like white people.
no, but
Yeah.
I think that it's counter propaganda. So
Ah.
if you remember, all of these stories about the Encanto don't fall in whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, they came from the local community. It's not like it were stories like
Yeah.
spread by the
Yeah.
authorities, right?
So
So
so you're thinking
we
that it
remember
could
we
have been,
hypothesized.
yeah. So you're
We
thinking
hypothesized in
the process was like Spanish came, Filipinos won't stop believing in Encantos. Oh, the Encantos look like us. And then the local Filipinos said like, yeah, don't trust them.
because remember in our episode, stop right now. Thank you very much. The
Mm-hmm.
Encanto episode, we hypothesized that probably there were a lot of, I don't know, local, like the beautiful local women were being
Yeah.
swept away
Yeah.
by these mestizos, right? Or by the
Mm-hmm.
Spanish. And so
Mm-hmm.
the local people were, kind of doing counter propaganda to say, no, he's not like a human being. He's actually an
Yes.
Encanto. Don't follow him.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
I would like to believe that that's what happened, because
Yeah.
it's not like Filipinos just bowed down and went quietly and believed every single thing that was,
Mm-hmm.
forced down their throats, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
want to believe this is kind of like a counter
Yeah.
propaganda that
Yeah.
helped kind of evolve the belief.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this account of like one of the ways that they tried to appropriate the power of a Babaylan. There was once a Babaylan, a Catalona named Diego Magsanga. And this is an account by a Spanish priest, Pedro Chirino. This is like 1604. So it would be like a good 80 years after the Spanish first came to the Philippines. So there was a Catalona, he was blind, and he was baptized, and he became sort of like a friar's assistant in Silang, Cavite. And he would teach children and adults catechism. And many people still followed him, even and believed him, and his faith even surpassed that of like the Jesuits priests that baptized him. And I was like, no, they destroyed his spirit. And then he himself was not a priest, but he was like a hermano, like a vicar or a deacon in the church. And with the group of peers that they were leading, there was another male Catalona who, together with this is a different guy now, who was with a group of peers that he was leading, was convinced by a Jesuit priest, Francisco Almerique, to convert to Christianity. And this other Catalona wore his hair long and braided it to signify his status as a shaman. So before he was baptized in front of an audience, he cut off his hair. They cut off his hair as the sign that the power of the Anito has been broken.
Did he get baptized willingly?
Yes, but that's to show that was like his connection to the Anitos. That was it's very Avatar. That was like his USB port to the netherworlds. So that's like, man, they made kids poop on Anitos. They cut off people's hair. That was just like so horrible. Anyways, so in the depictions of Babaylans, they were depicted differently and relegated to the mysticism, like the weird part of Christianity, like the culty part of Christianity, maybe for exactly for the reasons of minimizing their importance or influence. But in the 17th and 16th century, that, as I mentioned, they became like mini cult leaders called Dios or pretend Diyos. Sidebar. Sidebar. Sorry. Did I tell you before that my dad hypothesized that kare-kare is called kare-kare because it's kind of like curry, but not really? And when you repeat, it's like endearment, but also like pretend.
Ah.
Kunwari. Ganon. So kare-kare. And it really was. So the people the family that created kare-kare called it kari because it was like curry. And then it was kind of like curry, but not quite. Kaya it's called kare-kare. Anyways,
Yeah, it is true. I just looked it
right?
up.
Kari-kari, right?
Interesting.
I know. So they were Dios. So they were like pretend gods. And they were also, up to the late 19th century, there were spiritistas or like spirit. I don't know what's the translation for spiritista. It's anyways, spiritist.
Spiritist.
A spiritist. And there was a movement,
Like a spiritual,
like a spirit warrior.
like,
Not a prayer warrior,
aren't spiritistas like mediums?
they're like mediums, but they're also like psychics and mediums, I guess, would be the best thing. So the methods of worship were still basically the same. Faith healers, which I mentioned in passing during our anting-anting episodes, also were also like mediums, but instead of channeling Anito, they instead claim to channel saints, angels, Holy Spirit, and they also frequently use Western, now esoteric and pseudoscientific terminologies like psychic energy, with little connection to the traditional shamanistic behaviors. I remember this whole thing of like there's this kid who would no, this is fairly recent pala. There's this woman, I saw it on TikTok, who claims that she was being possessed by like Santo Nino or a saint. And then she would just like change her voice and she would look like she would be going into a fit. Like her eyes would roll on the top of her head, and then all of a sudden she had a different voice. I don't know if she's faking it or maybe she
Mm-hmm.
just has this associative disorder. I don't know, but it's still alive. I think it's safe to say it's alive and kicking up to today. So today, in
Yeah.
this day, there are still healers. There are still mambarangs, but not babaylans as such. They just have the function of the babaylan, but not necessarily the status of the babaylan. And some will still
Mm.
have the idea of the spiritual disease versus the natural disease. And for people who believe in a natural disease, that it is a natural disease, they'll just go to a doctor. Healer will refer them to a doctor, like, oh, you need an antibiotic. If it wasn't like a spiritual disease to begin with, which I kind of appreciate. I mean, medicine
Yeah,
still,
that's cute.
right? So there are still in Muslim Filipinos. So we talked about the Catholic influence, right? How it was eliminated. The conversion to Islam also affected it as well in terms of their status of importance. Because of course in Islam, there's a monotheistic approach pa rin, and there are still hierarchies within them. I don't think they were as horrible as the Christians were, the Catholics were, but they did relegate the function of folk healing to in dealing with indigenous spirits. So it's like this is kumbaga sa corporate structure, that's the local org versus the regional and the global org. And the other aspects eventually were taken over by the religious leaders. So there is a direct equivalent of a Christian Filipino faith healer and arbolario. They're called Islamized shamans known as pandita or gurus. So they're Islam, but they do the same function. And they follow Islam to provide traditional healing practices and cultural rituals retained from Islamic shamanistic past. So they actually retain some of their shamanistic beliefs from all of the Islamic nations that have eventually traveled. They also do rites, like minor rites, like akika, which is cutting the hair of the firstborn as a coming of age ceremony. The rukia, which is an exorcism, which unfortunately they do for homosexuals also. And there is a traditional massage therapy massage that is conducted. It is called agud or agod, and it's done by the Maranao and Mindanao people for
You
healing.
know, the ritualistic haircut reminds me of like my cousin.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember because I think we only did it with him. So I was kind of shocked that it was a thing. And
Yeah.
maybe it was because I don't know, in Pampanga we didn't do it. Maybe it was a belief of his dad in Bulacan. So this guy, he was like our third. He was like, so I'm the eldest cousin. He's like the third one.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was younger, meron siyang buntot. Like,
Yeah.
in the hair, there's like
Yes.
something, there's like one little long
Yeah.
clump or
Yeah.
lock at the
Yeah.
end.
Yep.
And they let him grow it till he was like 3 years old. So
Mm-hmm.
he looked like an anime character because he had like
Yes.
short hair here, and
Yeah.
he had like a buntot, like a tail
That's a
for his hair
Tagalog thing.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they eventually, like when he was 3 or 4 or something, then they eventually cut it. But I forgot what was the context of when they cut it. But it had to
Yeah.
do with superstition, eh?
Yes.
Like
So
you
for
shouldn't cut it until a certain age.
yes.
So I'm guessing it's stemming from these like coming of age type of things,
yes.
right?
Yes. For us in Batangas, the tradition you grow the hair all the way to the first birthday, which is why it's so horrible for me when you think of like some babies get their heads shaved, like, which is the Chinese tradition. You shave your head so that you get thicker hair, which is not true. So for us in Tagalog, on the first birthday, there's so many traditions. Actually, we should have an entire different episode for baby traditions. But until the first birthday, you don't cut the hair, and the first person to cut the baby's hair is actually the adult whom which you want the baby to get traits from. So me and my brother have actually cut a lot of our cousins' hair because they wanted the kids to be like smart like us and outspoken like us. And then you're the one who does the first snip. And then our younger cousins who went to America, they were like, oh no, the barber cut my kids' hair. So then they'll have the traits of the barber. I said, I don't know, because all the kids whose hair I cut, I don't know if they ended up like me in any way, shape, or form. But there's a ton of coming of age ceremonies. Like in Batangas also, they don't let the kids wear color until their first birthday so that the encanto doesn't get them, so that they're not appealing.
Well, in Bali, they believe that a baby, like the youngest in the community and the oldest in community, are the closest to like the gods or something.
Yeah, I
So they're
believe it.
treated very holy.
Mm-hmm.
So a baby is not allowed to step foot on the earth for the first whole year of its life.
Really?
Yeah.
So
And so
buhat-buhat
there's
lang
this
sila?
whole yeah, so there's this whole ceremony. Eventually when the kid turns one, they bring them to like the, I guess, the balian, or like
Mm.
the local like healers
Babaylan.
or
Yeah.
doctors. Yeah, the Babaylan equivalent. They call it balian here.
Mhm.
And there's this whole like, I don't know, half a day long ceremony or a few hours ceremony. They offer like a bunch of other stuff. And then finally
Mhm.
the baby's foot literally like steps on the floor. It's this
Oh.
whole like special thing because now I guess you're letting go of your holiness and purity and you're becoming like a human
A
with us.
human.
Yeah,
Oh,
something like
that's so
that.
cute.
Yeah.
That's so cute. Aw. Well, anyways, going back to the dark history of the Babay of the Babaylan. No, it's so you remember a lot of the males who became Babaylan, they lived as females. They weren't just effeminate or anything. They lived as females. They would have cis male husbands. They would have children. I don't know how. And they would dress as
Maybe
women
they
and
adopted.
oh, that would be fantastic. Adopt, don't shop for children. And so these feminized men in Islam converted groups, they were prosecuted because they have it was an unnatural crime. They were punished by the Muslim peoples in Mindanao by death, by burning, drowning, and their houses and properties were also burned because, like a germ, they thought it was contagious.
That's freaking horrible.
It is. And they still do rukiyas in Indonesia, in Jakarta today. So it's kind of a lot of these. What are they so scared of? What are they so scared of that they think they should kill these people? Oh my gosh. Anyway, so resistance to foreign rule. As I said, the shamans used their power and influence to revolt against the Spanish in areas like highlands of Cebu and in the interiors of Mindanao. In Spanish-controlled areas like Visayas, entire villages would defy the policies of resettlement. They want to move them to the cities because, of course, maybe the Spanish would like to farm on that land. So they would resist and they would move further inland, move further away from the
Highlands.
highlands, yes, or the interiors at the instigation of the Babaylan. And they say, we're going to move together, we're going to migrate together. And then the rituals were performed secretly in some areas. And they would say like, oh, this will make our way safe and this will protect our new community. But then when they were caught, they were still prosecuted and killed.
Which brings us back to the Moses analogy
Mm-hmm.
and how Moses might have been that equivalent
He was. He really
for his
was.
people.
He was because Aaron was like
Because
the political leader. He was the
imagine they were traveling around for 40 years. My
yeah
God, you're gonna
yeah
be, was it 40 years? You're
40
gonna be
years,
like
yeah.
so sick and tired. Parang, oh my god, when are we finally gonna settle? Like, dude,
Yeah.
where are you taking
Dude,
us?
ako nga, when I moved to Singapore and I didn't have a house for like 2 months, I was like, oh, this sucks. I have to live in a hotel for 2 months. And Moses had to travel
Try
for
40
40
years.
years. Yeah. In the desert. Jesus. No sunscreen. Anyway, so as I mentioned, there's so many, but over the 16th to 17th century, open revolts were led by shamans. And aside from the early revolts, they were all led by religious leaders who were either shaman and then later on folk Catholicism rather than true shamanism. But it was like the same kind of people who would lead it. I think that's pretty great. They just used a different costume, but it was the same. It was the same type of person. And I like to think, I like to believe, like reading this, I like to believe that there really is a certain person. There really is a certain person in every group who would have that potential to be both a spiritual and like a social leader. Maybe they're cult leaders now, I don't know. But like I like to believe that there is always that someone who will take up the mantle of leadership as needed. And these are just forms by which they choose. I'm really
I
into
have
comic books
a
right now.
I have a question.
Go.
Do you believe that one person should have both powers, or should it be split? Because I just find it dangerous if it's just one person holding that power,
It's dangerous for sure. It's kind of like governments. It's like
right?
checks and balances, right?
Separation of
Um,
church and state, right?
yeah. I think it is dangerous. I think in a large scale, definitely not. And in a small scale, that's what a cult is, right? It's the same.
Sometimes,
Sometimes it's a
sometimes.
cult, right? So I think overall, yes, it's dangerous, but I do think they are intrinsically linked. There's that how it is, and there is the how it should be. How it should be should definitely be separate. There should be checks and balances, right? And but at the same time, a structure that that enables checks and balance can be like overly bureaucratic and in a revolt situation, baka you just need one person. You need one person who has both the hearts and the minds of the followers to revolt and fight. The thing is, it looks like they approached it in a very individualistic way, like tribal Philippines. And the tribes used to fight each other. And it seems like except for a couple of tribes who banded together in common areas, that there was not as there's the Katipunan, which is like a united front, but they were other factions that they were fighting against even within themselves. So there is something to be said about a structure as well. But to the question of should, no, it shouldn't be just one person. That is dangerous. The last significant Dios rebellion was in the 19th century, led by Dionisio Magbuelas, better known as Papa Isio or Pope Isio. And he was a member of the Diyos Buhawi group. He organized his own Babaylanes group. So he gathered people of the remainders of another previous Babaylan in Negros against the Spanish rule in 1896.
Mm-hmm.
1896, right before we were sold off to America. And then after the Philippines was ceded to the Americans, he was made a military chief of Negros Occidental under the American government. So when the Americans came, he still was given authority. But he rebelled against the Americans in 1899 in the Philippine-American War. He surrendered in 1907 to American authorities that sentenced him to death. And he was imprisoned in Manila Bilibid prison and died in 11. So he was the
Yeah.
last big Babaylanes people. And then there's also a couple of people that I mentioned in the Pujanes, the people who wear red, who use anting-anting. There is still a group in Leyte. There's still a group in Samar, and they still use supernatural powers, but they're all men, and they use fetishistic amulets, holy oils, magic spells, and battle.
Mm. You
So
know, it reminds me your story of what is the name of the guy who got imprisoned in Bilibid?
Dionisio Magbuelas.
He reminds me of I read this book. I don't know if you read it. It's called Zealot.
Mm-hmm.
by Reza Aslan.
Oh yeah, I read that one.
You did?
He's the Bible scholar.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's about
it's an
Jesus.
amazing book.
Yeah, I
It's
loved
an
it.
amazing book, and it's basically, so the premise of the book is, how would Jesus's life have played out
Mm-hmm.
in actual history? So
Yeah,
using actual historical records,
yeah, yeah.
historical context of the time. And the main premise that he makes is Jesus is probably a zealot, and the zealot
Yeah.
was basically, most of the time a revolutionary leader, someone
Mm-hmm.
who was, sentenced to death because of, rebellion. He was a
Mm-hmm.
rebel, yeah. So he was a rebel leader basically.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the kind of what he puts together is all of these different versions of the gospels eventually that came
Yeah.
out. It was like the vestiges of the kind of what remained of the group, or how the different groups
Yeah.
evolved over time. And
Yeah.
obviously you have like very different the different sects that we see today. But
Mm-hmm.
I think what I found very interesting is, if we take away the spiritual part of it completely first, right? Like, they were people who were trying to fight against oppressive Roman
The
rule,
Rome. Yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so they wanted to kind of figure out a different set of values or set of morals to bring people together. He was
Mm-hmm.
very charismatic. He brought
Mm-hmm.
people together,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's this quality of people, the shiny, sparkly veneer of a psychopath that has
I
a
guess the point that I'm trying to make is, if you are in a situation where you're suffering
yeah.
and you can't find any logical way to get out of your
Yes.
situation,
Yeah.
if someone comes with such a compelling kind of message and
Mm-hmm.
mission
Mm-hmm.
and says, I can help you, like,
Yeah.
if we get together,
Yes.
we can find a way to rebel and
Yeah.
like get rid of these people who are oppressing
Yeah.
us, that's gonna
Because
be
I'm
so
the son of
attractive to you,
God.
right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. No, I mean, again, it's with this whole thing of cults and cultish leaders, right? My thing with the Babaylan is that it was an established social function. You know, they could have like taken over the village. They have such power because they held the metaphysical and the physical in their hands every day. It's like it's not just like your ancestors, your beliefs, your spirituality, but also like, yeah, maybe it won't rain anymore and you'll have nothing to eat and I'll just go off to the next village. They had so much power. I didn't see stories of abuse of power. Like there weren't any mass suicides or anything in
But that's
it.
because the Datu made sure that they had a specific
So
role, and
that's
that
the
was their
check and
only
balance.
role.
That was the check and
And
balance
that's
of
why
it.
it's important that it's separate,
Yes, 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 yes.
right?
Yeah, we answered our own question. So that was
I
the
love
check and
it.
balance. You
The
know,
Socratic method. I'm just kidding.
the resolution, the Socratic method. Thank you, Socrates. So that's what I had. And then in modern day, I think I already preempted myself because I talked about this disorder of the inner ear that is a genetic condition that maybe it's
Yeah.
called the superior canal dehiscence syndrome, which you hear yourself in your head, how you sound, simultaneously hearing your external voice, which is weird. And it's genetic, but it makes you sensitive to the weather. It makes you sensitive to any kind of pressure changes, altitude changes. And so that might have been one of the things that enabled the Babaylans to function today. But I think it's interesting. But it could have been any number of mental disorders, but it could have been just like a genuine
Mental disorders are neurodivergence.
neurodivergence. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it could just be a whole number of things, but a person who becomes a babaylan has a natural instinct or is trained and identified to leverage these differences to their benefit, to the benefit of the community.
Shane is watching me like I'm weird. What?
Oh.
What? 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 Just kidding.
So
Okay.
that was our very long and very loaded 3-part episode on Babaylans. I loved reading about it and learning about it, but it made me really sad too. Uh, so So I want to talk someday to a Babaylan that can like be a follow-on episode for us, and we can
Yeah.
interview like what, like, if there are still Babaylans today, and there are, how did they learn about it? How did they, are there records? Are
And
there
what's their take on the history, right? Like how
mm-hmm.
much of it does get passed on?
Yeah.
Like are they still kind of, I mean, obviously in the past they were like revolutionary leaders. Do they still kind of have the same perspectives on like the vestiges of colonialism that we're
Yeah.
seeing today, or
Yeah.
have they moved on?
Yeah.
Right?
Are they catering to the new community of today? Right?
I
With the
mean they have
modern,
to by
yeah,
necessity.
for sure, but like, is it part of their function now to sort of figure out where do we came from, to like is there a reclamation happening of our history, of trying to find out?
Yeah. I
I
mean,
wonder.
the reality is obviously we can't go back to the way things actually were, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of us really are Catholic now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you don't, it's not like we're gonna go back to animism
Yeah.
just like that, right?
Yeah.
And I think the question to your point is, so these babaylans who do exist, right? Do they have the same type of influence in their community? Do they have the same type of roles in their community?
Mm-hmm.
Or has the, has
Is there a
colonialism
babaylan
succeeded?
is there a babaylan barangay captain? Right?
The
Is
first babaylan congressperson.
'Di ba? Is there a babaylan, or like, is there a babaylan who's also a teacher? Still a babaylan who's also the community healthcare worker. So, I mean, this was a very involved and very long series of episodes. I hope you guys learned something. If you guys have any experiences with babaylans or healers that you'd like to share, please do let us know. If we got anything wrong, again, please let us know. We'd love to hear about it.
I genuinely wish that these parts of our history and our culture do get taught
Mm-hmm.
more broadly.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
because we've learned about this from very actively seeking this
Yeah.
information, right?
Yeah.
You hear it once or twice from somewhere, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not something that is readily available to you. But it's such a rich and important part of your history,
Yeah, it
right?
is. It is. It's a big
We
I wonder if, and this is one of my hypotheses that you always hear me saying. I wonder if the reason why Filipino women are a lot more visible in leadership positions because of this inherent respect for the feminine in communities and societies, which is again still two-sided. There's still the binukot practice that still exists, but also this authority that babaylans get is something I think that is rare in many other communities. That's why we had female presidents. So I wonder if there is some part of that that had trickled down in terms of the regard for the capabilities of a female, not necessarily the status of a female, but like the capabilities of a female, that we are not just
for sure.
right. So
I mean, the
that's
fact that we have accounts of female rulers, right?
mm-hmm,
The Queen of Tondo, for
yes,
example, right?
yes,
Or
yes.
Duha, if she
Or
actually
duha,
existed.
yes,
The
yes.
fact that having female warriors were, quite common
Mhm, mhm.
in pre-colonial society really
Yeah.
speaks about at least some level of, we don't know, right? Because we
Yeah.
were not there, but at least some level of equality that
Yeah.
we did not see in the colonial systems,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
And it's interesting because there are also kind of counters to that. So obviously there was a push and pull later
Yeah.
on throughout the years, because I remember one of the first things we talked about in the Manananggal episode when we talked about wedding superstitions. There's a
Yeah.
superstition that the wife can't step on the foot of the husband
Yeah.
because otherwise she would be too domineering in the relationship. So that
Yeah.
superstition would have existed for a reason,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So
And also that in Batangas, if when the woman is brought over to the husband's home, she has to eat something sweet. So she has only sweet words to say to her husband.
yeah,
So yeah,
If
but
you
I
if you if you haven't listened to that episode yet, that was our first ever episode on the Manananggal.
yes,
So that's super fun. No,
yes,
but this is amazing. This is like, as a Filipino woman today, it makes me proud that there's this richness in our history
yeah,
on the power of women and
mm-hmm.
what women could do if you
Yes,
actually empowered them, gave them the opportunity, gave
yeah,
them the education,
yeah,
and gave them the authority
yeah,
to to be themselves, to
mm-hmm.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And
I
it
really
gives me hope that we are
okay.
still empowered today after even after 300 years of Spanish oppression, that
Yeah.
it survived somehow.
Okay, well, I hope that you guys enjoyed that. I hope you guys learned a lot. I definitely did. I've done some readings here and there on the Babaylan, but there's just so much that you're able to unpack and uncover. If you guys have any other interesting bits of trivia or things you know at the Babaylan, do let us know. If you know of any related topics that you feel we should cover as kind of a springboard from these, I think we would love to know what you think. Also, let us know what you think of these like long, like 2-3 parters. I know that usually we kind of do like one-off
One
episodes on like different creatures, but sometimes we do this kind of intense
deep
deep dives.
dives.
Let us know what you think about them. And as always, where can they find us, Anima?
Well, they can find us on they can find us on the Gods Must Be Crazy pod on Instagram and on Facebook and on Spotify, Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, anywhere you podcast, anchor.fm. If you find us, when you find us, please do download, rate, review, subscribe, and share with a friend. I never,
Yeah.
and much as you forward memes and such, why not forward
Yeah.
a podcast? It's
If
great.
you find this on YouTube, hello, is one of our first
Hello,
few kind of video
Corey's.
video podcasts. We hope you're enjoying it, and please subscribe for more videos. On Instagram, where there are a lot, that's where we talk to most of our listeners. So it would be great to have conversations over there. We love getting messages from people. We also love reading your reviews of the pod. So that would be cool. But most importantly, I think the best way to support us is to share this podcast with people who you feel would be interested in the topics we talk about. Purportedly, we are a mythology and folklore podcast, but we do end up talking a lot about pre-colonial history
Society.
and society and stuff like that, because I think, you know, it sorry, there was a fly. Because a lot of mythology and folklore teaches about ourselves, our history, and our identity
Yeah,
through the years. And I think
yeah,
that's really what motivates our passion to keep learning about these different things. Yeah.
yes, yes.
So, as always, see you guys till the next time.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.